Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. My bicep was bothering me today, so I did a rep test of pull-ups instead of my usual work set of chin-ups. Should I be tracking my progress on these independently of one another? It's always after a squat and a vertical push. I would prefer to do chins, but I don't want to skip the entire pull entirely over some bicep/elbow tenderness. Yeah, you track every lift separately, brother. Anytime you do a variation of an exercise, that is a separate PR, it's a separate lift, and you track it separately because you're going to lift a slightly different weight. You're going to be stronger on different lifts than others, and they need to be tracked differently. Your closed grip bench press, your floor press, your flat bench, depending upon your grip width, they're all separate PRs. They're all separate lifts. You need to track them accordingly. Your high bar and your low bar squat are not the same lift. Your pause squat versus your stretch reflex squat are not the same exercise. Track all of them separately. You should always do that with any exercise variation so that you know roughly what your strength is there, and if you're progressing on it, if you go and do it again later or mess with it. All right, next question. Hey Jason, when trying to maintain strength on a mild slow cut, is it wise to increase the rest times between sets? During my maintenance/slow bulk phase, I kept the sets at 3 minutes apart. I notice now when cutting, I have to increase them to 4 minutes and don't feel that bad. Am I shortchanging myself in any way besides the additional time to complete my workouts? Thanks, Jason. No, you're not shortchanging yourself. You need to be able to maintain your strength, so take longer rest. And here's the question I would ask. During your bulking phase, if you're benefiting now from 4-minute breaks, you might have benefited more from 4-minute breaks during your bulk. That's something that people need to keep in mind here. There's pretty good data on that, even on hypertrophy, not even just strength, but hypertrophy. If you need longer breaks in order to replicate the same set multiple times with the same weight, and it lets you lift more weight on every set, longer breaks produce more hypertrophy even in studies. Right? This whole short break thing for hypertrophies is not tested very well. It's not been shown to be very good when we actually test it in the real world when it comes to hypertrophy. In fact, longer breaks that let you lift a heavier weight for more reps usually produces better results over like 10 and 12 week studies when we study actual muscle growth in people, because total tonnage absolutely does matter. It matters, brother. And so you're cutting, you absolutely are going to need to do that possibly. No, you're not shortchanging yourself. You cut by your caloric deficit. Your weightlifting isn't there to provide cardio for you. That's what conditioning work is for. So I wouldn't worry about it from that perspective. All right, next question. Jason, can you talk about the similarities and differences of potential injuries when using machines versus a Smith machine? Maybe touch on things to be aware of, and if one is going to use machines. Thanks. Don't use machines. There you go. Problem solved. Problem solved. In fact, I think everyone would make better gains if all these machines were completely removed from gyms. Okay, granted, people who don't want to learn how to do lifts wouldn't show up, but it's not really a big deal. They're too lazy to really get results anyways because they're too lazy to bother to learn how to do basic lifts. You can't help people like that. So my point on it is you can't compare them because every machine is different. Every machine is different. I'm going to say the machines that probably would have the lowest injury rates are going to be hammer strength because it doesn't force you into a straight line. There's at least some curvature to a lot of them, but the fact that you're fixed into a track is going to cause potential injuries because it could cause imbalances. It could cause shearing stresses on different things, and ultimately less overall stabilizers get built in the body, and it's going to make you more likely to get hurt doing other things. I mean, Junkie Ward's a perfect example. All these silly partials and nonsense on machines and everything, when he got under an actual barbell, he popped both his titties, right? Exactly. It's because these things cause you to get hurt when you do other things outside of doing the machines. It's not even always the machines. Whereas in the Smith machine, hurts you directly. Now, Smith machines are popular because it's a way to do a machine lift on dozens of different lifts. Instead of needing a dozen different machines to do it, they just use a Smith machine to lock you into a fixed track. But Smith machines put all sorts of bizarre shearing stress on your Ds, your back, your shoulder joints, everything else. They are the thing that's really the most dangerous out of all the machines. I think it contributes enormously to lifting injuries, and multiple people have died in a Smith machine. It's killed people. More people have died under a Smith machine almost than a barbell, even though more people use a barbell for bench press. Like benching on a Smith machine has literally strangled quite a few people to death. Even Matt Reynolds over at Starting Strength Online Coaching, one of his cousins after he became a coach, actually died in a Smith machine. Actually died. He'll tell you the story about it. Smith machine killed him. because he was training alone in one. And they aren't safe. At least with a barbell, you have a way to get it off of you if it comes down. The Smith machine, there is no way to do a roll of shame or to bounce it down off of you. If it comes down, it comes down. And once you're pinned, that's it. If you don't get those hooks in place, there's nothing you can do. It's a machine now locked on your neck. And yeah, it kills people. Most stupid device ever invented. And honestly, they almost shouldn't be in gyms. They should be considered a liability. Gyms shouldn't even have them in there, in my opinion. It's because of the injuries and death rate of that piece of crap. All right, next question. Rant over. Hey Jason, what are your thoughts on tracking total tonnage moved on an exercise as a form of progressive overload? I know Brian Costa does it. For example, for bench press, you move a total of 5,000 pounds. The next workout, you try to move 550, etc. Thanks. I think those are pretty big jumps, and I don't think anyone but fairly weak people are going to make jumps that big in their tonnage workout to workout. We're talking about linear progression at that point, even if it's volume linear progression. All right, total tonnage, I think it can be a valuable tool. It could be a valuable tool as long as you're not dealing with vastly different intensities. In other words, yeah, if you're staying roughly, let's say the 70 to 80% range, I think total tonnage is a good way to track overload. Again, assuming you're using the exact same range of motion, same technique, everything else. It becomes problematic when we start adjusting weight heavily or intensity, because all of a sudden it will have you believing that you're getting less work done, or that you're not going to make gains anymore and you're going to lose gains because you suddenly go into a different rep range. In other words, if you're working in the 8 to 10 rep range, you can track volume there, but when you drop down to 5s, even if you've gotten stronger because you've made gains from the other and you're lifting a lot more weight, you know, let's say you were using 300 pounds in the other and you've gone to 400 pounds, but you're doing less total tonnage, it might make you think that you're making less progress if you track it in that regard. I think it's a valuable tool to roughly track overload when you're doing similar intensities, but by that same token, you could just count reps. You could count reps and get the exact same thing. I don't think there's anything magical about tonnage, even though we've seen studies showing that when volume is equal, muscle mass seems to be equal with vastly different rep ranges. But we also don't know that those people wouldn't have gained almost as much muscle using half the tonnage with the heavier weight and lower reps also. We haven't had as much direct comparison of that to even compare it to. So like with anything else, it's just a form of tracking. There's nothing magical about it. It's just a way to organize and track your progressive overload as long as we are staying at similar rep ranges and intensities. I think it kind of starts going out the window when we start adjusting those. Because it tends to favor much higher reps. If you start tracking tonnage as your form of progression, we would all be doing 30 rep sets for everything for all of our gains, and we know that's not going to be ideal. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I hear that people use the term axial loading, including yourself. What does this mean? Is there a limit to which your spine can tolerate / recover from spine-bearing compound lifts, to which you would have to use non-spinal bearing lifts, i.e. doing leg press instead of squats, to get leg volume in your spine / load back to recover? If so, could you explain this, and how would I know what the limit is? Thanks. Axial loading is just harder to recover from. In other words, the more weight you can press upon your spine, the more it's going to take you to recover from even doing the same amount of work in all the primary movers. So in other words, yes, a squat is more difficult to recover from than a leg press. A deadlift is easier to recover from than a rack pull with 200 more pounds loaded on the bar compressing on your spine for a shorter range of motion, right? It takes longer to recover from the more compressive stress on your spine, but that's also cumulative through the set. So don't think that you're not getting a massive axial loading component because you go to 10 rep sets on the deadlift with 400 pounds instead of 3 rep sets with 500. Trust me, it's still amount of axial loading you're experiencing over volume also. The total compressive stress and over time put on your spine. Right? Total time involved also, how long that weight's compressed on it over the course of days and weeks through your workouts. But for this to be a real problem, you've got to be pushing some pretty high volumes. In other words, if you only do 8 sets of heavy squats a week and you're a sub 500 pound squatter, this isn't something you need to be worrying about to a great extent. Like, you don't need to go, oh, I need to do a bunch of leg press because I'm not getting enough leg volume. You're not compressing your spine that much, bro. All right, you're doing 8 sets with 400 pounds on your spine. it starts to become a bigger problem for very, very strong lifters who have an enormous work capacity. That's what you need to keep in mind. The average novice and even intermediate lifter probably doesn't have either the strength or the work capacity for this to really become an enormous problem. It starts to become a problem for them when they start doing really silly short range of motion exercises. In other words, when you start doing pen squats with 700 pounds when you're a 350 pound squatter, or you start doing rack pulls with 800 pounds and you can only deadlift 400, that's when you're going to see axial loading problems, right? It's not going to be for most lifters, so they get very, very strong, that this starts to become a factor, in which case you've got to work around it the best that you can. All right, next question and last question of the week. Hey Jason, what could possibly be dangerous about a squat pad, and how is it any different to wearing a thicker shirt? Does a safety squat bar have these risks? Because it moves the center of gravity and it reduces the stability on your back. In other words, because you're going to have some forward lean on a squat no matter what, the safety squat bar is not quite the same. We're dealing with a different animal. That pussy pad on the squat tends to raise the bar up, which means it's pushing it further up your back and further up your neck than it would be with your normal bar path. Therefore, it's going to exacerbate the amount of forward lean, and it's going to put more potential risk on your neck and upper vertebrae. Because again, it's not having you do forward lean because it's further down your back. It's causing it because it's pushed further up, artificially not resting on your spine. You've shifted your center of gravity up to an inch. All right, that's going to be problematic with that because it's also less stable. In other words, the bar can't seat as well because it's got a big old slippery pussy pad, a big tampon set on it. It's not going to be locked in as stable on your back. And it's a tool that people use who don't know how to squat. They haven't built a callus and they haven't learned where to place the bar. In other words, it's for rank novices who are too ignorant to know what they're doing. They're the people who need it. And the problem with that is that it causes a higher risk of injury because it's not stably set, and that's the reason it hurts and they need the pad. That's one of the big reasons. And then they've made it even more unstable while putting it in a bad position. All right, that's the problem with it. The safety squat bar is different because it's intended to pull you forward, and you have a separate thing to hold it stable. In other words, you have stabilizer bars sitting across your traps that you hold onto with your hands that make the bar automatically stable without placing it in the right spot. The safety squat bar is intended to not be put in a secure location. It's intended to be pushed higher up your back. It's intended to pull you forward. But you have safety handles that also put some of the weight on top of your traps, and then your hands can take some of it and you can hold it stable to prevent injuries while forcing yourself to be pulled forward. That's the whole point. It forces you forward, but it's done in a safe manner because of the security of the extra bars and the hands on it. So it makes it not injury. If you were to perform a safety bar squat, the exact same bar path with a regular barbell, it wouldn't be safe. You would have the exact same risk you have with a normal pussy pad. It's a bad thing. So hopefully that clarifies it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.